Good afternoon, Chair Cabral and Vice Chair Tyler and Rep. Keefe. My name is Hema Sarang Sieminski, and I'm the Deputy Director at Jane Doe, Inc., the Massachusetts Coalition Against Sexual Assault and Domestic Violence. And I'd like to share with you a little bit about why our coalition, a coalition that centers victims and survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence, strongly supports this bill, this moratorium. Far too often, as you all know, arguments to invest in prisons and jails are uplifted in the name of victims of crime, including survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And we're really here to correct that narrative. The reality is that less than 1% of rapists will ever spend a single day behind bars. And the rates of prosecution and incarceration of those who commit the most severe incidents of domestic violence are also low. So this is not why we need prisons. Rather, the vast majority of those who are behind bars are individuals targeted by policies and practices that result in mass incarceration of low-income, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And so when we shine a light on the unique realities of women and trans folks in prison, who we see are survivors. And just as the many folks who spoke today, as Ms. Angie's story suggests, we're talking about survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence and trafficking. And I won't go through all the statistics in the interest of time, but to say at least the one that strikes us is 86% of women in prison identify as survivors of sexual violence. I think that in this moment, putting a pause on the building of new prisons and jails in Massachusetts needs to be recognized as a survivor issue. Massachusetts has one of the lowest populations of women in prison, and yet we're constantly feeling like we're on the brink of throwing $50 million to construct a new women's prison. This is unconscionable, and it's a deep disservice to survivors in the Commonwealth. There is no such thing as a trauma-informed prison, and in fact, prison, as we know, replicates the abusive power and control that so many survivors have experienced during their abuse. Survivors, like everybody on this brilliant panel has said, need community-based support, services, opportunities to earn thriving wages, access to abundant and affordable housing that's safe. And we at JDI want to see meaningful efforts to use existing options to dramatically reduce the population of women in prison, so that the excuse of needing to create a new facility to deal with the uninhabitable conditions of Framingham, that excuse becomes moot, because there won't be people in prisons, that they will be among us in community. And so my colleagues here in this room have really concrete, brilliant, strategic, thoughtful, and practical answers about how this is done. So let's invest in that work, and I really am hopeful that we can move this forward this session. So thank you all.